These red wine braised short ribs may sound like a luxurious meal served up at a 5-star restaurant, but they're actually incredibly easy to make in your own home kitchen, which I think we should just now consider to be a 5-star restaurant. All you have to do is sear them, braise them with some veggies, broth, and of course a little bit of red wine, and a few hours later you will have the most succulent, tender, fall off the bone meat that is perfect for piling on a mound of mashed potatoes or cauliflower mash. It's comfort food at its finest and a meal that will definitely impress, so let me show you how to make it. Before we dive into the recipe, make sure to take your short ribs out of the fridge at least 30 minutes prior to cooking. You want the meat to come to room temperature as it will cook more evenly and get that lovely sear on the outside. Now, short ribs don't look like a rack of ribs that you might be used to. They're taken from the beef chuck portion of the cow and they're usually square or rectangular in size. They'll also come bone in, which is what you want, and choose ones with good marbling for the best flavor. For this recipe, you'll need 5 pounds of short ribs, and right now I'll just set those off to the side so that they can come to room temperature. You'll need to dice 2 medium yellow onions for this recipe, and honestly, I feel like I should have used my food processor to dice these onions up today because they were extra potent with their tear-inducing chemicals, and chopping 2 onions back to back had the tears streaming down my face. But it's a small price to pay for this amazingly tasty meal. Also, side note, I got this plastic food scraper and I'm kind of obsessed with it. I had the bad habit of using my knife to help scrape up food from the cutting board into a bowl, and over time that can dull your knife faster, and it's not good for the cutting board. So if you're in need of a cheapy food scraper, I'll link this one I bought below. Next, peel and chop 3 medium carrots. You guys should be pros at dicing carrots by now with all the mirepoix veggies in my recipes, but slice the carrots in half, then in half again lengthwise, and cut across for the perfect dice. And once all 3 carrots are chopped, you can just add them on top of the onions in your prep bowl. You'll need 6 garlic cloves for this recipe, so just give them a good whack to help remove their outer skin, and then once you've got them peeled, take them over to the stove as you'll mince them directly into the pot. The last item to prep is 6 slices of bacon, and you'll just slice the bacon into 1-inch thick pieces. Also, pro tip, it's easier to slice the bacon while it's still cold from the fridge. Transfer the sliced bacon to a small bowl. I probably could have used a bigger prep bowl here as my bacon is overflowing out, but I'll just make it all fit. At this point, my short ribs have come to room temperature, so I'll use a paper towel to blot up any excess moisture from the meat, and of course making sure to blot the other side as well. Generously season the short ribs with kosher salt and black pepper. I use about 1 tablespoon of kosher salt and about 1 teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper for one side of the meat, and then just use my fingers to rub it all in, then flip the meat over and repeat the process on the other side. Transfer the short ribs to a plate and then take them over to the stove with the other ingredients you've prepped, and then get ready to pop a bottle of wine. You'll need 2 cups of red wine for this recipe, and you can use your favorite, whether that's a Cab, Merlot, Pinot Noir, or other variety. I always just tell people to cook with wine that they like to drink because you only need 2 cups of wine for this recipe, and then you can drink the leftovers along with dinner, which just seems like a win-win in my books. Alright, as you can see, I like to have all of my ingredients prepped before starting a recipe because it just makes the process so much easier. Heat a large pot on medium-low heat and add the sliced bacon to the pot. You don't need any oil for this recipe because fat will render from the bacon and you'll cook the short ribs in the bacon grease, which also imparts amazing flavor. And as I add the bacon to the pot, I just use my fingers to pull apart any slices if they're stuck together. Cook the bacon until it's crispy and then use a slotted spoon to remove it to a small bowl, leaving all of the bacon grease in the pot. Turn the heat up to medium-high and add the short ribs in one layer. You'll need to work in batches so that you don't crowd the pot. Cook the short ribs for 1 to 2 minutes on each side until they've got a nice golden brown sear on the outside, then flip them over and cook the other side. Once that first batch is done, remove them to a plate and then repeat the process with the remaining short ribs. Now, at this point, it may look like you've got dark brown bits adhering to the bottom of your pot, but don't worry about that, as it will automatically release here in a second when we add the onions and red wine to deglaze the pot. So toss in your bowl of chopped onions and carrots and cook these for 4 to 5 minutes or until the veggies have softened. And as they soften, you'll notice that the moisture from the onion will naturally loosen all those browned bits from the pot. Mince the garlic straight into the pot and then add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Give that a stir for another minute just to make sure everything is well combined. Then add 2 cups of red wine, being careful as it may splatter a bit in the hot pot. Bring the red wine to a simmer and let it simmer for about 5 minutes or until it reduces by about half. Add the seared short ribs back to the pot, and this time you can just pile them in and nestle them amongst each other to fit. Then add 4 cups of beef broth. You'll also add back those crispy bacon bits, assuming you didn't eat too many of them as they were off to the side, and 2 sprigs each of thyme and rosemary. Once that's all in the pot, add the lid, reduce the heat to low, and simmer the red wine braised short ribs for 2 to 2.5 hours or until the meat is ultra tender. I'll give the pot a stir once or twice throughout the process, but otherwise it's really hands-off until they're done. After the meat has simmered in that luscious liquid of red wine and broth, the fibers in the meat will break down and you'll be left with the most succulent short ribs, which really do fall right off the bone. You can serve the short ribs up on the bone if you'd like, or use a fork or tongs to remove the large chunk of meat from the bone before serving, which is what I usually do. Today I've made some of my creamy homemade mashed potatoes, so I'll add a portion to a plate and then add a few good chunks of meat on top. But you can't forget the sauce because that's the best part. So use a spoon to get those softened veggies, bacon bits, herbs, and red wine brothy sauce and drizzle that on top and let it soak into the mashed potatoes. Lastly, I like to add a sprinkle of freshly chopped parsley for a pop of green, and that's it. That's restaurant quality red wine braised beef short ribs served up in your own kitchen. This recipe always hits the spot for a savory, ultra comforting meal, and I think it also makes for a great date night meal as you can start the recipe earlier, get ready while the meat is cooking, then serve it up and impress that someone special. And let's not forget that you have half a bottle of wine left, which is also perfect for date night. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe, and if you did, hit that like button and share it with your family and friends, and I will see you again in the next video.